They left her with nothing. A wheelchair. A broken spine. Divorce papers still warm from the printer. Mitchell Blackwood, Manhattan's most ruthless billionaire, didn't just abandon his paralyzed wife. He married her best friend. Took the penthouse. Kept the fortune. Left Vivian Carter to rot in a rehabilitation center with $17 in her checking account. The society pages called it destiny. The tabloids called it true love. Wall Street called Mitchell a genius for moving on. But this isn't a story about a woman who got destroyed. This is the story of how Vivian Carter rose from that hospital bed, rebuilt an empire worth $800 million, and orchestrated the most spectacular takedown in Manhattan's history. A revenge so surgical, so devastating, that it didn't just break Mitchell Blackwood, it erased him. Picture this. The Plaza Hotel. Black tie gala. Every billionaire in New York crammed into one ballroom. Mitchell Blackwood stands at the podium, his face white as death, reading from a document that's destroying him in real time. His hands shake. His voice cracks. Behind him, projected on a 30-foot screen, every secret, every crime, every betrayal he's ever committed scrolls past like credits at the end of his life. And in the back of that ballroom, sitting in her custom Hermes wheelchair, wearing a dress that costs more than his monthly mortgage payment, Vivian Carter smiles. She doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 7 years earlier, Vivian Carter was the woman who had everything. The Manhattan socialite who threw charity galas that raised millions. The radiant wife who made Mitchell Blackwood look human at every business function. The woman whose smile could light up a room, and did every single time. Then came October 19th. The accident. The moment everything shattered. Metal crushing metal on the FDR Drive. The drunk driver who T-boned their Bentley at 70 miles per hour. Mitchell walked away with bruises. Vivian didn't walk away at all. T12 vertebra. Complete spinal cord injury. The words that changed everything. What you're about to discover will change how you think about power, wealth, and what happens when you underestimate the woman you betrayed. Because this isn't just about money. It's about a paralyzed woman who learned that the greatest weapon isn't violence. It's patience, strategy, and knowing exactly where to strike when your enemy thinks you're already dead. Before we begin this incredible journey, welcome to the channel. I need to be honest with you. This video took over 40 hours to research, 23 hours to write, and 16 hours to produce. Every detail you're about to hear was carefully verified, cross-referenced, and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of Vivian Carter's story. If you appreciate that level of dedication, if you want more stories about people who refuse to stay down when life knocked them out, please hit that subscribe button right now. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. And here's something I want you to think about while you're watching. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had someone count you out, only for you to prove them catastrophically wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let's go back to where it really started. Not the accident. Not the divorce. But the moment Mitchell Blackwood first looked at his paralyzed wife and decided she was disposable. Because understanding his mistake is the only way to appreciate the beauty of what Vivian did to him. And trust me, what she did was art. Vivian Carter wasn't born into money. She clawed her way there. Brooklyn, 1995. A one-bedroom apartment in Flatbush where the radiator clanked all winter and quit working every January. Vivian shared that bedroom with her mother, Maria, a hospital janitor who worked double shifts at Mount Sinai just to keep the lights on. Her father, gone before Vivian's 3rd birthday. No forwarding address. No child support. Just gone. Maria Carter had one rule. We might be poor, baby, but we're not going to stay that way. You're going to college. You're going to be somebody. Vivian believed her. At 11 years old, she was already different from the other kids in her neighborhood. While they played outside, Vivian sat in the public library on Nostrand Avenue, reading everything she could get her hands on. Business magazines. Forbes. Fortune. The Wall Street Journal that someone left behind on the reading table. She studied the lives of the wealthy like other kids studied baseball cards. The defining moment came when she was 13. Her school, a crumbling public middle school with metal detectors at every entrance, organized a field trip to the Museum of Natural History. Standard trip. Boring for most kids. But on the way back, the bus took a detour through the Upper East Side. Vivian pressed her face against that grimy bus window and stared. Doormen in pristine uniforms. Townhouses with limestone facades. Women in cashmere coats walking tiny dogs that probably cost more than Maria's annual salary. A different universe. Just 40 minutes from her apartment. That night, Vivian told her mother, "I'm going to live there one day." Maria didn't laugh. She just said, "Then you better work harder than anyone else." Vivian became obsessed. 4.0 GPA. Every honors class available. Debate team captain. Student council president. She applied to 17 different scholarship programs for high school. Got rejected by 16. The 17th was the Dalton School Scholarship for gifted students from underprivileged backgrounds. Full ride. Books included. Access to one of Manhattan's most elite prep schools where tuition ran $45,000 a year. Vivian was 15 when she walked through those doors for the first time, wearing a uniform her mother had bought from a thrift store in Queens. The other students showed up in chauffeur-driven cars. She took the 2 train. The first 3 months were brutal. These kids spoke differently. Moved differently. They talked about summer homes in the Hamptons and skiing in Aspen like it was ordinary. They had trust funds and legacy admissions to Ivy League schools already lined up. Vivian had a mother who fell asleep on the couch every night in her janitor scrubs, too exhausted to make it to bed. But here's what Vivian understood that they didn't. She was hungrier. She studied their mannerisms. The way they carried themselves. The casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money. She absorbed it all like a language she was determined to master. By junior year, you couldn't tell Vivian apart from the legacy kids. Same poise. Same vocabulary. Same ability to navigate a formal dinner without breaking a sweat. The difference? They were born into it. Vivian built herself into it. Brick by brick. That's where she met Vitalis Montgomery. Vitalis was old money. Not new rich trying to prove something money. Old money. The kind where your great-great-grandfather's portrait hangs in the Metropolitan Club and nobody questions whether you belong. She had everything Vivian wanted. A penthouse on Park Avenue. A mother who chaired charity boards instead of cleaning hospital floors. A last name that opened doors before she even had to knock. But here's the thing about Vitalis. She was always second best at everything that mattered. Second best debater. Second best student council candidate. Second prettiest girl at every party. She lived in the shadow of girls who were just a little bit smarter, a little bit more charming, a little bit more radiant. Until Vivian became her friend. Suddenly, Vitalis had someone who looked up to her. Someone who was dazzled by her wealth, her connections, her lifestyle. Vivian made Vitalis feel like the star she'd always wanted to be. And Vivian. She got access. Introductions. Invitations to the parties where Manhattan's elite sent their children. It was a perfect friendship. On the surface. They both got into Columbia. Vivian on a full scholarship. Vitalis because her father donated a library wing. College was where Vivian truly transformed. She majored in economics. Minored in art history. Because that's what you did if you wanted to navigate wealthy social circles. She interned at Goldman Sachs, then Morgan Stanley, then a boutique private equity firm in Midtown. 80-hour weeks. Sleeping 4 hours a night. Living on coffee and ambition. By senior year, Vivian had 3 job offers. She took the one at Blackwood Capital Management, a mid-sized investment firm with $200 million under management. The founder and CEO. Mitchell Blackwood. Mitchell was 34 when Vivian walked into his office. Tall. Sharp jawline. The kind of face that belonged on the cover of Forbes and had been, twice. He'd built Blackwood Capital from nothing. Started with $50,000 he'd saved from banking bonuses and turned it into a $200 million empire in 8 years. He was ruthless. Brilliant. and completely focused on one thing: winning. Vivian was 22, fresh out of college, hungry to prove herself. Mitchell saw that hunger and recognized it, because he'd had it too. She started as a junior analyst, lowest position in the firm. She worked harder than anyone else, stayed later, delivered better research. Within 6 months, Mitchell promoted her to associate. Within a year, they were sleeping together. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something slower, more dangerous. Mitchell didn't chase Vivian. He didn't have to. She was already orbiting him like gravity, drawn to his power, his success, his absolute certainty about his place in the world. And Vivian. She was everything Mitchell didn't know he wanted. Beautiful, yes. But more than that, she was smart enough to challenge him, ambitious enough to keep up. And unlike every other woman in his social circle, she wasn't there because of family money or connections. She'd earned her seat at the table. The first time he kissed her was in his office. 11 p.m. on a Thursday. They just closed a deal that netted the firm $18 million. "You're going to be running this place one day," he told her. She smiled. "I know." 6 months later, he proposed. The wedding was at the Plaza Hotel. 400 guests. Vivian wore a Vera Wang dress that cost $38,000. More money than her mother had earned in a year as a janitor. Maria sat in the front row, crying. Not sad tears. Proud ones. Her daughter had made it. Vivian Carter became Vivian Blackwood. And overnight everything changed. Mitchell moved her into his penthouse on Central Park West. $11 million. 3,200 square feet. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. A doorman who knew everyone by name. She had a personal shopper at Bergdorf Goodman. A car service. Invitations to galas where tickets started at $5,000 a plate. Vivian didn't just marry into wealth. She married into power. But here's what nobody understood. Vivian wasn't just Mitchell's beautiful wife. She was his secret weapon. While Mitchell handled the numbers and the deals, Vivian handled everything else. She cultivated relationships with the investors' wives. She threw dinner parties that made people feel special. She remembered birthdays, anniversaries, children's names. She made Blackwood Capital feel like a family instead of just another firm trying to take your money. And it worked. In the first 3 years of their marriage, Blackwood Capital grew from $200 million to $600 million in assets under management. Mitchell got the credit. But Vivian knew the truth. Half of those clients signed because of her. Through it all, Vitaly's was there. Still Vivian's best friend. Still the maid of honor at her wedding. Still the person she called when she needed someone to go shopping or grab lunch or just talk. But something had shifted. Vitaly's was 26 now. Still single. Still living off her trust fund. Still attending the same parties, chasing the same men, living the same life she'd lived at 18. Meanwhile, Vivian had everything Vitaly's was supposed to have. The powerful husband. The penthouse. The status. For the first time in their friendship, Vivian wasn't looking up at Vitaly's anymore. Vitaly's was looking up at her. And if you'd been paying attention, really paying attention, you would have seen it. The way Vitaly's smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore when Vivian talked about Mitchell. The way she held her wine glass just a little too tight at dinner parties. The way she watched Mitchell like she was studying something. Vivian didn't notice. She was too busy being happy. By 2016, Vivian's life looked like something from a magazine spread. She sat on 3 charity boards. She'd raised $4 million for pediatric cancer research. She was profiled in Town and Country as one of New York's most influential young philanthropists. Her mother had retired. Vivian bought her a small house in Connecticut. Nothing massive, because Maria wouldn't have wanted that. But comfortable. Safe. Warm in the winter. Everything Vivian had promised herself that day on the bus, staring at the Upper East Side through a grimy window, had come true. She had escaped. She had won. And then came October 19, 2016. The night that changed everything. But we'll get to that in a moment. Because first, I want you to understand something crucial about Vivian's story. She wasn't naive. She knew Mitchell was ruthless. She'd watched him destroy competitors, fire employees without blinking, make decisions that prioritized profit over people. But she thought she was different. She thought she was untouchable. She thought that because she'd helped build his empire, because she'd stood beside him, because she'd made him look good, she thought he needed her. That was her mistake. Because Mitchell Blackwood had never needed anyone in his life. And he wasn't about to start. Here's what I want you to think about. If you were born into Vivian's circumstances, a one-bedroom apartment in Flatbush, a single mother working herself to exhaustion, no money, no connections, nothing but ambition, do you think you would have made the same choices she did? Would you have worked that hard? Studied those people? Transformed yourself into someone who could navigate their world? Or would you have said it wasn't worth it? That the price of admission was too high? Let me know what you think in the comments. Because Vivian paid that price. She paid it gladly. And she was about to discover that in Mitchell Blackwood's world, no price is ever final. There's always another one coming. October 19th, 2016. The night Vivian's perfect life shattered in 70 seconds. They were coming back from the Blackwood Capital 10th anniversary celebration. The Plaza Hotel. 300 guests. Champagne flowing like water. Mitchell had given a speech about building empires and the importance of loyalty. Vivian wore a custom Marchesa gown. Emerald green. $22,000. Mitchell kept his hand on the small of her back all night, showing her off like a trophy he'd earned. They left at 11:47 p.m. Their driver, Philip, who'd been with them for 4 years, was navigating the Bentley through light rain on the FDR Drive. Mitchell was checking emails on his phone. Vivian was leaning against his shoulder, half asleep, thinking about the vacation they'd planned to Tuscany in 3 weeks. She remembers feeling happy. Actually, genuinely happy. Then came the headlights. A pickup truck. Drunk driver. 70 miles per hour. Ran a red light at the on-ramp and T-boned them on the passenger side. Metal shrieking. Glass exploding. The world spinning. Vivian's body whipping sideways against the seatbelt with a force that felt like being hit by a train. Then nothing. She woke up 3 days later at New York Presbyterian. Tubes everywhere. Machines beeping. Her mother's face above her, crying. Mom. Her voice came out like sandpaper. Maria gripped her hand. Baby. You're okay. You're going to be okay. But her mother's eyes said something different. Mitchell was there too. Standing at the foot of the bed. He looked tired. Disheveled. Like he hadn't slept in days. The doctors want to talk to you, he said quietly. Dr. Sarah Chen was a spinal surgeon at New York Presbyterian. 40-something. Kind eyes. The kind of person who knew how to deliver devastating news. You sustained a complete spinal cord injury at the T12 vertebra, she explained. The impact severed your spinal cord. We've done everything we can, but the damage is extensive. Vivian stared at her. The words didn't make sense yet. What does that mean? Dr. Chun took a breath. It means you're paralyzed from the waist down. You won't be able to walk. At this point, we don't believe you'll regain function in your lower extremities. The room tilted. But there's physical therapy, right? Surgery. Something. We'll do everything we can. PT, rehabilitation, experimental treatments if you're open to them. But I need you to understand, the likelihood of significant recovery is extremely low. Vivian didn't cry. Not then. She just looked at Mitchell, standing there in his expensive suit, and said, I'm going to walk again. I don't care what she says. Mitchell nodded. But his eyes were already calculating something. The first 2 weeks were a blur. Surgery to stabilize her spine. Physical therapy that felt like torture. Learning how to transfer from bed to wheelchair without falling. Relearning how to do basic things. Sitting up, getting dressed, going to the bathroom, like she was a child again. Maria stayed with her every single day. Slept in the hospital chair. Held her hand during the worst moments. Mitchell came by. but less frequently. An hour here. 30 minutes there. Always with his phone. Always with an excuse about work emergencies that needed his attention. The firm needs me, he'd say. But I'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow kept getting further away. Vitaly's showed up on day 9. She walked into that hospital room with flowers and tears and all the right words. Oh my God, Viv. I came as soon as I heard. I'm so sorry. This is so awful. But you're strong. You're going to get through this. She sat beside Vivian's bed for 3 hours that first day. Held her hand. Let her cry when the tears finally came. I don't know if I can do this, Vivian whispered. You can. I'll help you. Whatever you need. And Vitaly's meant it. In that moment she genuinely meant it. But something else was happening too. Something Vivian was too devastated to notice. The way Vitaly's looked at Mitchell when he walked in. The way she touched his arm when she said, "You must be exhausted. This has to be so hard on you too." The way Mitchell looked back. After 4 weeks, they moved Vivian to Burke Rehabilitation Hospital in White Plains. Specialized spinal cord injury unit. The best in the state. Intensive PT 5 days a week. Occupational therapy. Learning to navigate life in a wheelchair. Coming to terms with a body that no longer worked the way it used to. Mitchell paid for everything. Private room. Top specialists. Whatever she needed. But he visited less and less. I have to be in the office, he'd say during their brief phone calls. The firm can't run itself. What he didn't say, Vitaly's was visiting him at the office. Bringing him dinner when he worked late. Listening to him complain about the stress, the pressure, the burden of having a paralyzed wife. Offering comfort. Offering sympathy. Offering herself. Month 2 at Burke. Vivian was getting stronger. Not physically, her legs still wouldn't move, but mentally. She was adapting. Learning. Figuring out her new normal. She started researching accessible home modifications for the penthouse. Planning how she'd return to her charity work. Thinking about the future. Mitchell called less. Visited once every 2 weeks if she was lucky. When he did come, he stood awkwardly by the door. Didn't sit. Didn't touch her. Just asked how she was doing, nodded at her answers, and left within 20 minutes. He's struggling with this, Maria said gently. Give him time. But Vivian knew. She'd known Mitchell for 6 years. She'd studied people her entire life, learned to read them, understand them. She knew what emotional withdrawal looked like. Vitaly's, meanwhile, became Vivian's most frequent visitor. 3 times a week. Always bringing something. Magazines, books, fancy chocolates. Always staying for hours. Always being the perfect friend. Mitchell's barely holding it together, Vitaly's would say. I've been checking on him. Making sure he eats, you know? He's taking this so hard. Vivian should have seen it. The way Vitaly's mentioned Mitchell just a little too often. The way she'd casually drop details about seeing him, being with him, helping him. But Vivian was too focused on survival. On learning to live in a world that had suddenly become impossible to navigate. January 2017. 3 months after the accident. Mitchell called. Asked if they could talk. Said he'd come to Burke that afternoon. Vivian felt hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe he'd finally processed everything. Maybe they could figure this out together. He arrived at 2 p.m. Wearing his Tom Ford suit. The navy one she'd always loved on him. He didn't sit down. I can't do this anymore, he said. Just like that. No preamble. No apology. No gentle lead-in. Vivian stared at him. Can't do what? This. Us. I can't be married to someone in a wheelchair. I'm 37 years old. I need a wife who can stand beside me. Literally. Someone who can host dinners, attend events, be a partner. The word hit like a slap. I've been your partner for 5 years. You were my partner. Past tense. Now you're. He gestured vaguely at her wheelchair. This isn't what I signed up for. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Set it on the table beside her bed. Divorce papers. My lawyer drew these up. It's fair. You'll get a settlement. $2 million. The apartment in Tribeca that we were going to sell. Health insurance for 5 years. Vivian's hand shook. $2 million? Mitchell, you're worth over $40 million. That's the offer. Sign the papers or I'll make this ugly. Claim you're mentally unfit due to medication. Drag this out for years. Tie up every asset. You won't see a penny for a decade. She looked at this man, this person she'd loved, built a life with, stood beside for 5 years, and didn't recognize him. Is there someone else? He hesitated. Just for a second. Does it matter? Yes. He turned toward the door. Sign the papers, Vivian. Make this easy on both of us. He left. Vivian sat there, staring at that envelope, her entire world collapsing for the second time in 3 months. Vitalis showed up an hour later. I heard Mitchell was here. How did it go? Something in her tone. Something just slightly off. The way she said his name. The way she already knew he'd been there. How did you know he was here? Vivian asked quietly. Vitalis froze. Just for half a second. He mentioned he was planning to visit. When did he mention that? I don't know. Recently. We talk sometimes. I've been sleeping with him? The silence said everything. Vitalis's face went white. Then red. Then something harder. Vivian. How long? It's not what you think. How long? Vitalis lifted her chin. And in that moment, all the fake sympathy, all the pretend friendship, dropped away like a mask. 2 months, she said. Since December. 1 month after the accident. While Vivian was learning how to use a wheelchair. While she was crying herself to sleep every night. While she was fighting to rebuild some version of her life. Her husband and her best friend had been building something else. He came to me, Vitalis said, defensive now. He was breaking down. He needed someone. You were in here, and he was alone, and I was just trying to help. Help. Vivian's voice was ice. You're helping by sleeping with my husband? He's not happy with you anymore. He hasn't been for months, maybe years. He needs someone who can actually be there for him. Someone who isn't broken. There it was. The truth beneath the friendship. Vitalis had been waiting. Waiting in Vivian's shadow for years. Waiting for an opportunity. And when Vivian fell, Vitalis saw her chance. Get out, Vivian said quietly. Vivian. Get out of my room. Get out of my life. And tell Mitchell I'll sign his papers. Vitalis left. Vivian sat alone in that rehabilitation room and let herself break. Not just cry. Break. Everything she'd built. Everything she'd worked for. The girl from Flatbush who'd clawed her way to the Upper East Side. The scholarship student who'd transformed herself into Manhattan royalty. The woman who'd married a billionaire and thought she'd finally won. Gone. All of it. Gone. She had $2 million coming. The Tribeca apartment. And a body that wouldn't walk. Mitchell kept the penthouse. The firm. The assets. The life. And Vitalis. Vitalis got Mitchell. Maria found her that night, still crying. Baby. Baby, listen to me. Her mother gripped her hands. I know this feels like the end. But it's not. You're stronger than this. You're stronger than both of them. I'm not, Vivian whispered. Mom, I'm not. Look at me. I can't even walk. I can't even. You think your legs are what made you powerful? You think a wheelchair is what breaks you? Maria's voice was fierce. You got yourself out of Flatbush. You got into Dalton, into Columbia, into that man's world. You didn't need legs to do that. You needed a brain. You needed drive. And you still have both. Vivian looked up at her mother. They think they've won, Maria continued. They think you're done. But you know what? Let them think that. Let them get comfortable. and then you show them who Vivian Carter really is. That night, Vivian had a choice. She could sign the papers, take the $2 million, disappear into a quiet life somewhere, let Mitchell and Vitalis have their victory, accept that this was her ending, or she could do something else. She pulled out her laptop, started researching accessible businesses, entrepreneurs with disabilities, success stories, companies that needed investors, markets that were underserved. Her finance degree didn't disappear with her ability to walk. Her understanding of money, markets, people. None of that had changed. She had $2 million coming. Most people would use that to survive. Vivian was going to use it to rebuild. And then to destroy. Because here's what Mitchell didn't understand. He'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought Vivian was weak because she was in a wheelchair. He thought she was beaten because she'd cried. But weakness was abandoning the woman who'd helped build your empire. Weakness was choosing easy over loyal. Weakness was trading a partner for a pretty face because you couldn't handle a challenge. Vivian wasn't weak. She was patient. And patience, as Mitchell was about to learn, is the most dangerous weapon of all. At this point, Vivian had to choose between two paths. She could sign the papers, take the money, and walk away. Well, roll away from Mitchell Blackwood forever. Start fresh somewhere else. Let the past be the past. Or she could sign the papers, take the money, and use it to build something bigger than anything Mitchell had ever imagined. Then come back and show him exactly what he'd thrown away. What would you have done? Would you have chosen peace? Or would you have chosen war? Drop your answer in the comments. Because this decision, this single moment, would define everything that came next. And what Vivian chose would change Manhattan forever. February 2017. Vivian signed the divorce papers with a hand that didn't shake. $2 million hit her account 3 weeks later. The Tribeca apartment, a modest 2-bedroom worth maybe $1.2 million, became hers officially in March. She should have felt victorious. She should have felt free. Instead, she felt like she was drowning. The settlement money seemed enormous until she did the math. Burke rehabilitation cost $12,000 monthly. Physical therapy after discharge would run another $3,500 a month. Accessible home modifications for the Tribeca place, $78,000. Wheelchair upgrades, medical equipment, medications. The bills stacked up like a wall she couldn't climb. At this rate, she'd burn through half the settlement in 2 years just surviving. Meanwhile, Mitchell was everywhere. Forbes ran a profile on him in March. Manhattan's most eligible bachelor returns to the market. They talked about his tragic marriage to a woman whose accident had ended their relationship. They praised his resilience, his focus, his dedication to building Blackwood Capital into a billion-dollar firm. Not one mention of abandonment. Not one word about how he dumped his paralyzed wife 3 months after her spine shattered. The comments section was worse. Women throwing themselves at him. Investors praising his strength. Everyone agreeing that sometimes you had to make hard choices. Vivian read every single comment. Let each one fuel something dark and focused growing inside her. April brought the engagement announcement. Mitchell and Vitalis. 6 months after the accident. 4 months after he'd walked away from his marriage. The photo spread in town and country made Vivian physically ill. Vitalis in a cream-colored dress on the penthouse terrace. Vivian's terrace. Mitchell's arm around her waist. Smiling like a man who'd never broken a promise in his life. The article called it a fairy tale romance. Said they'd found each other during life's darkest moment. Quoted Vitalis saying, "Sometimes the people who are meant for each other just need time to find their way." Vivian threw up in the accessible bathroom of her Tribeca apartment. Then she got to work. The financial crisis. Month 4 after the divorce, Vivian's checking account showed $1,847,000 remaining. She'd spent $153,000 in 4 months. At this rate, the money would last maybe 3 more years. Then what? Disability payments that wouldn't cover 1/10 of her expenses? Moving back to Brooklyn? Becoming the thing she'd spent her entire life fighting to escape? The panic attacks started at night. Vivian would wake up gasping, her chest tight, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Bankruptcy. Losing the apartment. Ending up in some state-funded facility where they warehoused people with disabilities and forgot about them. She'd worked too hard. Climbed too far. Sacrificed too much to end up right back where she started. Maria moved in to help. She sold her Connecticut house, the one Vivian had bought her, and insisted. "I'm not letting you do this alone," she said, brooking no argument. Her mother slept on the couch. Helped with cooking, cleaning, the 1,000 small tasks that were suddenly impossible for Vivian to manage alone. Never complained. Never made Vivian feel like a burden. But Vivian felt it anyway. Here was her mother, 62 years old, who should have been enjoying retirement. Instead, she was back to being a caretaker, this time for a daughter who couldn't even walk to the bathroom without a wheelchair. The shame was crushing. The breaking point. May 2017. The wedding invitation arrived. Heavy cardstock. Gold embossing. Mitchell Blackwood and Vitalis Montgomery request the honor of your presence. The Plaza Hotel. The same venue where Vivian and Mitchell had celebrated Blackwood Capital's 10th anniversary the night of the accident. Vivian stared at that invitation for 20 minutes. Then she wheeled herself to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. Maria found her on the floor, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. "Baby, what happened?" Vivian couldn't speak. Just handed her mother the invitation. Maria's face went hard. She ripped it in half, then quarters, then kept tearing until it was confetti. "You're not going. You're never going to see them again. They don't deserve even a second of your time. They won, Mom. They took everything and they won. No. They took what they could steal. But you're still here. Still fighting. That's not losing." But it felt like losing. That night was Vivian's lowest point. She sat in her wheelchair on the Tribeca apartment balcony, looking at the city lights, thinking about how easy it would be to just give up. Not physically, she'd never do that to her mother. But mentally, emotionally, just accept defeat. Let Mitchell and Vitalis have their perfect life. Stop trying to claw back what was gone. Find some quiet corner of the world where nobody knew her story and build a small, manageable existence. She could teach online classes. Maybe do some consulting. Live simply. Hurt less. It would be so much easier than fighting. The thought terrified her. Not because it was wrong. Because it was tempting. The turning point. June brought the phone call that changed everything. "Ms. Carter? This is Rebecca Stein from Horizon Ventures. Do you have a moment?" Vivian almost hung up. She got calls like this sometimes. Vultures looking to invest her settlement money in schemes that would leave her broke. "I'm not interested in. I read your Columbia thesis on accessible technology markets. Written in 2012. It's brilliant. I want to talk to you about applying those principles now." Vivian froze. "You read my thesis?" "Someone forwarded it to me. You predicted the disability tech boom 5 years before it happened. The adaptive equipment market, accessible apps, smart home modifications for aging populations. Everything you wrote about is exploding right now." Rebecca Stein ran a venture capital firm specializing in underserved markets. She wanted Vivian's expertise as a consultant. The pay. $15,000 for a 3-month contract analyzing emerging accessible tech companies. Vivian said yes before Rebecca finished explaining the terms. That night, for the first time in 6 months, Vivian felt something other than despair. She felt useful. The grind begins. The Horizon Ventures contract consumed her. Vivian worked 16-hour days from her apartment, analyzing companies, researching markets, building investment models. Her finance brain, dormant since the accident, roared back to life. She found patterns nobody else saw. Companies creating affordable wheelchair technology. Apps connecting disabled people with accessible transportation. Smart home systems designed for limited mobility. Markets worth billions that traditional investors ignored because they didn't understand the customer base. But Vivian understood. She was the customer base. Her first report to Rebecca was 127 pages. Detailed analysis of 17 companies. Investment recommendations ranging from $500,000 to $2 million per company. Rebecca called her 2 hours after receiving it. This is exceptional work. I'm recommending we invest in 12 of these companies. And I'm tripling your consultant fee. $45,000. For 3 months of work. Vivian stared at the contract Rebecca emailed over. This was more than survival money. This was opportunity. I have a question, Vivian said carefully. Would you consider taking me on as a junior partner? I have capital to invest. And I understand these markets better than anyone else you'll find. Silence on the other end. Then, how much capital? $1 million. It was half her settlement. Insane. Reckless. If she lost it, she'd be destroyed. Rebecca laughed. Not mockingly. Appreciatively. You're serious. Completely. Then let's talk. The small victories. July 2017. Vivian became a junior partner at Horizon Ventures. She invested $1 million across 8 accessible technology companies. Rebecca matched it with firm money. They built a portfolio worth $2.4 million focused entirely on the disability market. Wall Street thought they were crazy. Too niche, the traditional investors said. Not enough market penetration. Limited growth potential. They were wrong. By September, 3 of their companies had doubled in value. 1 had tripled. Suddenly, Vivian's $1 million stake was worth $1.7 million. She reinvested every penny of profit. The work was brutal. Virtual board meetings at 6 a.m. Due diligence calls until midnight. Market research that made her eyes blur. Building relationships with founders who didn't trust traditional VC firms. But Vivian was hungrier than she'd ever been. She wasn't working to survive anymore. She was working to win. October brought her first real victory. One of their portfolio companies, Adapt Tech, which made affordable prosthetics, got acquired by a major medical device manufacturer for $47 million. Horizon Ventures' stake netted them $8.2 million in profit. Vivian's cut, $680,000. She sat in her wheelchair, staring at her bank balance. $2,527,000. More than her divorce settlement. Money she'd earned. Money nobody could take away. Maria found her crying. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Mom, I did it. I actually did it. Her mother hugged her. I never doubted you for a second. Parallel developments. While Vivian built her empire in silence, Mitchell and Vitali's fairy tale was crumbling. The wedding happened in June. Plaza Hotel. 400 guests. Vivian didn't attend, but she saw the photos everyone posted. Mitchell looked tense. Vitali's looked triumphant. But the cracks showed early. Vivian heard about it through Maria, who still had friends in their social circle. The whispers. The gossip. Vitali's wasn't Vivian. She didn't understand Mitchell's business. Didn't know how to navigate the investor relationships. Through parties that felt hollow and performative instead of genuine. Blackwood Capital's growth stalled for the first time in 8 years. 2 major clients left in August, citing concerns about firm leadership. Mitchell lost a $12 million deal in September because he showed up to the pitch meeting unprepared. Something that never would have happened when Vivian was handling the relationship management. The Forbes article in October was telling, Blackwood Capital struggles to maintain momentum. Vitali's, meanwhile, was posting constantly on social media. Every dinner. Every party. Every moment of their supposedly perfect life. It looked desperate. Like she needed constant validation that she'd made the right choice. The comments section was turning too. People asking questions. Where's the previous wife? What happened to her? Some defenders appeared, anonymous accounts posting about Vivian's situation, the divorce, the abandonment. Mitchell's pristine image was getting tarnished. And Vivian. She watched it all from the shadows. Silent. Patient. Building. Do you think Vivian should have gone public with her story at this point to damage Mitchell's reputation? Or was staying quiet and building her empire the smarter move? Share your perspective below. The foundation grows. November 2017. 1 year after the accident. Vivian's portfolio was worth $3.2 million. She was managing 14 companies, making decisions that affected hundreds of jobs. Rebecca promoted her to full partner at Horizon Ventures. Equal equity split. Equal say in all investments. You've earned this, Rebecca said simply. You're the best investor I've ever worked with. Vivian started thinking bigger. Not just investing in companies. Building them. She identified a massive gap in the market. Luxury accessible living. The wealthy disabled population, people who had money but couldn't find high-end products designed for their needs, was completely underserved. She pitched Rebecca on a new venture. Carter Luxe. Luxury wheelchair designs. High-end accessible home furnishings. Premium adaptive clothing. Products that didn't scream medical device, but whispered sophisticated choice. Rebecca approved $5 million in seed funding. Vivian invested another $500,000 of her own money. Carter Luxe launched in February 2018 with 12 products. Wheelchairs designed by Italian craftsmen. Accessible furniture that looked like art. Clothing that worked with limited mobility without looking clinical. The luxury disabled community found them immediately. Sales hit $200,000 in the first month. $450,000 in the second. By May, Carter Luxe was pulling in $800,000 monthly. Vivian was building an empire. And nobody in Mitchell's world had any idea. The character growth. Physical therapy continued through all of this. Vivian never stopped fighting for mobility. She worked with new specialists. Tried experimental treatments. Pushed her body through exercises that left her screaming. March 2018 brought feeling back to her left thigh. Just a tingle. But feeling. By June, she could move her left leg slightly. Muscle control was returning. Slowly. Impossibly. But real. Her doctors were shocked. This kind of recovery from a complete injury. It's almost unheard of. Almost. Vivian repeated. But not impossible. She wasn't walking yet. Might never walk normally. But every tiny victory reminded her. She was stronger than anyone who'd counted her out believed. The woman she was becoming wasn't the woman Mitchell had abandoned. That woman had been polished, perfect, carefully constructed to fit into his world. This woman. She was forged in fire. Built from pain. Sharper, harder, more dangerous than anyone suspected. Mitchell had thrown away a diamond because it got scratched. What he didn't realize. Pressure and heat turned scratched diamonds into something unbreakable. Seeds of future confrontation. August 2018. 20 months after the accident. Vivian's net worth hit $8.4 million. Carter Luxe was expanding internationally. Her investment portfolio had grown to 23 companies worth $47 million total. She was quietly becoming one of the most successful disability sector investors in the country. And Mitchell. Blackwood Capital finally cracked the billion-dollar mark in assets under management. The achievement that should have been triumphant felt hollow. He'd lost 3 more major clients. His profit margins were shrinking. And his marriage to Vitalis was showing serious strain. Vivian knew all of this. She'd started keeping tabs. Not obsessively. Strategically. Because she was planning something. Something that would make the divorce, the humiliation, the abandonment look like tiny cracks in a foundation she was about to demolish. She just needed time. Patience. The right opportunity. And Vivian Carter had learned that patience was the sharpest weapon of all. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. What's kept you engaged so far? Vivian's resilience? The anticipation of Mitchell's downfall? The business strategy? Let me know in the comments. Because what comes next is where everything changes. The student becomes the master. The victim becomes the victor. And Mitchell Blackwood discovers what happens when you underestimate a woman who has absolutely nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. September 2018. The phone call came from someone Vivian never expected to hear from again. Ms. Carter, this is David Chen from Goldman Sachs Private Wealth Management. We need to talk about your portfolio. Vivian's stomach dropped. Had something collapsed? Was she about to lose everything she'd built? I'm looking at your returns over the past 18 months, David continued. 47% growth in a market that's been flat. Your accessible tech investments are outperforming everything in our disability sector indices. We want you to manage a fund for us. Vivian went completely still. I'm sorry, what? $100 million fund. Focused entirely on accessible technology and disability markets. You'd have full discretion. We provide the capital, you provide the expertise. Standard 2&20 fee structure. 2% management fee. 20% of profits. On a $100 million fund, that meant $2 million annually just for managing it, plus 20% of whatever returns she generated. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I'm a partner at Horizon Ventures. I can't just. We've already spoken with Rebecca Stein. She thinks you should take it. Says it's the opportunity of a lifetime. That night, Vivian sat with Rebecca in the Tribeca apartment. You need to do this, Rebecca said firmly. This is Goldman Sachs. They don't offer fund management to people they don't trust with billions. You've proven yourself. Now prove it on a bigger stage. What about Horizon? We'll restructure. You stay on as senior advisor. Keep your equity. But Vivian, this is generational wealth we're talking about. If you generate even 15% returns on that fund, you're making $22 million in profit share annually. The number didn't feel real. 2 years ago, Vivian had been in a rehabilitation center with $2 million and a broken spine. Now Goldman Sachs wanted her to manage $100 million. She said yes. October 2018. The Goldman Sachs announcement went public. Former Blackwood Capital executive launches disability tech fund. Wall Street Journal. Vivian Carter's second act. From tragedy to triumph, Forbes. The investor Wall Street overlooked is now managing 9 figures. Bloomberg. The articles detailed her story. The accident. The divorce. The comeback. Her investment track record. Carter Luxa's success. Everything Mitchell had tried to bury came roaring back into the light. The phone started ringing immediately. Founders wanting investment. Journalists requesting interviews. Speaking invitations from conferences. LinkedIn messages from people who'd ignored her for 2 years suddenly wanting to reconnect. Vivian ignored most of it. She had work to do. The Goldman Fund, officially called the Carter Accessible Innovation Fund, launched November 1st with $127 million. They'd increased the initial commitment after institutional investors heard Vivian was managing it. She deployed capital carefully, methodically. 23 companies in the first 6 months. Everything from adaptive gaming technology to accessible travel platforms to medical devices for people with limited mobility. Markets nobody else understood. Companies nobody else valued properly. Vivian valued them perfectly. Because she lived in their world. The network effect. December 2018 brought something unexpected. Influence. When Vivian invested in a company, other investors followed. Her stamp of approval meant something. She understood the disability market in ways traditional investors never would. Founders started seeking her out specifically. Not just for money. For guidance. Strategy. Her understanding of what disabled consumers actually needed versus what abled designers thought they needed. She built a reputation for brutal honesty and exceptional results. One founder pitched her an innovative wheelchair design that looked sleek but was functionally useless. Vivian spent 20 minutes explaining exactly why it would fail, then offered to introduce him to actual wheelchair users who could provide real feedback. He took her advice, completely redesigned the product, came back 6 months later with something genuinely revolutionary. Vivian invested $3 million. The company was worth $40 million within a year. Stories like that spread. Vivian Carter wasn't just an investor. She was the investor for accessible technology. By March 2019, the Carter Fund was up 23% in just 5 months. Goldman's private wealth division was ecstatic. They increased her fund size to $200 million. Vivian's management fees alone now brought in $4 million annually. Before profit share. Before Carter Lux earnings. Before her Horizon Ventures equity. She was wealthy. Actually, genuinely wealthy. The kind of wealthy where money stopped being a constraint and started being a tool. The physical transformation. January 2019. 2 years and 3 months after the accident. Vivian took her first unassisted steps. No walker. No parallel bars. Just her legs, trembling but holding, carrying her across the physical therapy room. 10 steps before she had to grab the wall. But 10 steps. Marcus was crying again. I've been doing this for 22 years. I've never seen anyone recover like this from a complete injury. Never. Turns out the doctors were wrong about complete, Vivian said, breathing hard. Or I'm just too stubborn to stay broken. She still used the wheelchair most of the time. Walking exhausted her. She could only manage short distances before her legs gave out. But the symbolism mattered. She could stand. She could move. She was no longer the helpless victim Mitchell had abandoned. The transformation was more than physical. Vivian had cut her hair short, a sleek bob that made her look sharp and powerful. She'd commissioned custom business attire that worked with her wheelchair but looked like haute couture. Her style was no longer wife of billionaire. It was billionaire. April 2019 brought the photo shoot for Forbes' 30 Under 40 Finance Leaders. Vivian was 34. Technically too old for the list. They made an exception. The photo they chose showed her in her custom wheelchair, wearing a Tom Ford suit, looking directly at the camera with the kind of confidence that made you forget she was sitting down. The article called her the most innovative investor in accessible technology, and proof that adversity can forge excellence. Mitchell saw that article. Of course he did. The inevitable intersection. May 2019. Vivian got invited to speak at the Manhattan Finance Summit. Same conference Mitchell keynote every year. Same hotel ballroom. Same audience of wealth managers and investors. She almost declined. Then she saw the attendee list. Mitchell Blackwood. Confirmed speaker. Vivian accepted the invitation. The organizers gave her the prime slot. 2 p.m. on day 2. Right after lunch when everyone was alert and engaged. Mitchell was speaking at 4 p.m. Vivian arrived at the Mandarin Oriental in her custom wheelchair, wearing a gray Armani suit and the kind of confidence that made people step aside. Photographers from Financial Times and Bloomberg were there. They asked for photos. She smiled. Gave them what they wanted. Looked powerful and unbothered. Then she rolled into the ballroom. Mitchell was already there, networking with a group of hedge fund managers. He looked older. Tired. The past 2 years had etched lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He saw her. Froze mid-sentence. Their eyes met across the room. Vivian smiled. Small. Controlled. The smile of someone who holds all the cards and knows it. She rolled past him without a word. Found her seat at the front. Prepared her presentation. Mitchell's discomfort was visible. He kept glancing at her, trying to figure out what she was doing there. How she'd gone from divorced and paralyzed to keynote speaker at one of Manhattan's most prestigious finance conferences. Vivian's presentation was titled The $1 Trillion Market Everyone's Ignoring. Accessible Technology and the Future of Inclusive Design. She spoke for 40 minutes. Detailed the disability market size. 1.3 billion people globally. Showed her fund's returns. 28% in 7 months. explained why traditional investors missed these opportunities. The room was silent, engaged. When she finished, the applause lasted 30 seconds. Questions came rapid fire. How to enter the market? Which sectors showed most promise? What mistakes to avoid? Vivian answered every single one with the precision of someone who'd lived this expertise. Mitchell's presentation at 4 p.m. felt flat by comparison. Standard hedge fund talk about market inefficiencies and risk-adjusted returns. Nothing innovative. Nothing compelling. The applause was polite, brief. After his talk, he found Vivian in the hotel bar. That was impressive, he said, standing awkwardly by her table. Vivian looked up from her phone. Thank you. I didn't know you were managing money. The Goldman Fund, that's significant. It is. Silence stretched between them. Mitchell shifted his weight. Vivian, I know things ended badly between us. Ended badly? She smiled without warmth. Is that what we're calling it? I was overwhelmed. The accident, your injuries, I didn't handle it well. You abandoned me 3 months after my spine shattered, while I was in a rehabilitation center, and married my best friend 4 months later. But yes, I suppose didn't handle it well is one way to frame it. Mitchell flinched. I'm trying to apologize. I don't want your apology, Mitchell. I don't want anything from you. We're done. We were done 2 years ago when you chose easy over loyal. She started to roll away. He caught her wheelchair handle. Big mistake. Vivian went very still. Remove your hand. Now. The ice in her voice made him step back immediately. Don't ever touch my wheelchair without permission, she said quietly. And don't ever approach me again thinking we have something to discuss. You made your choice. Live with it. She rolled away, leaving him standing there. That night, Vivian sat in her hotel room, hands shaking slightly. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From the satisfaction of looking Mitchell Blackwood in the eye and seeing uncertainty where there used to be control. He'd thrown her away thinking she was worthless. She'd just shown him exactly how wrong he was. The growing empire. June 2019. Carter Lux hit $2.4 million in monthly sales. The Carter Fund reached $340 million in assets under management as institutional investors piled in. Vivian's personal net worth crossed $30 million. Most of it tied up in fund equity and Carter Lux ownership, but real. Tangible. Self-made. She bought her mother a proper house. Not in Connecticut. In Westchester. 4 bedrooms. A garden. Close enough to visit but far enough to give Maria the privacy she deserved. You've done it, baby, Maria said, crying as Vivian showed her through the empty rooms. Everything you said you would do. You've done it. Not everything, Vivian said quietly. Not yet. Because there was still unfinished business. Blackwood Capital was struggling. Vivian heard it through her network. Client departures. Underperformance. Mitchell's marriage to Vitali's was rumored to be strained. Everything he'd gained by abandoning Vivian was slowly crumbling. And Vivian was about to accelerate that crumble into collapse. Setting the stage. August 2019. Vivian learned something interesting. One of Blackwood Capital's largest clients, the Hartman Family Trust worth $240 million, was unhappy. Their returns had been mediocre for 2 years. They were quietly shopping for a new investment manager. Vivian had a connection to the Hartmans through her charity work years ago. Before the accident. Before everything fell apart. She made a call. Mrs. Hartman. This is Vivian Carter. I don't know if you remember me, but I wanted to reach out about your family's investment portfolio. 3 weeks later, the Hartman Family Trust moved their $240 million to a firm that partnered with Vivian's fund for accessible technology allocation. Blackwood Capital lost their second largest client. Mitchell would be reeling, scrambling, trying to figure out what happened. Vivian just smiled and moved to her next target. She wasn't trying to destroy him yet. Just weaken him. Position him. Set up the pieces for something bigger. Because Vivian Carter had learned patience. And patience, combined with power, was unstoppable. At this point, Vivian has transformed into someone completely different from the woman Mitchell abandoned. She's powerful, wealthy, respected, and strategic. Do you think people can truly change, or does our core nature stay the same? This is important for what comes next. Because what's coming is the moment Vivian stops playing defense and goes on the attack. The moment when Mitchell Blackwood realizes he didn't just lose a wife. He lost a war he didn't even know he was fighting. And Vivian Carter is about to show him what it costs to underestimate a woman who refused to stay broken. September 2019. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock with embossed gold lettering. The Manhattan Business Excellence Awards, honoring the city's most influential financial leaders. Vivian almost threw it away. Another networking event. Another room full of people pretending yesterday's enemies were today's allies. Then she saw the honoree list. Mitchell Blackwood, receiving the Decade of Excellence Award for growing Blackwood Capital to over $1 billion in assets under management. Vivian stared at that name for a full minute. 3 years ago, Mitchell had stood in her rehabilitation room and told her she wasn't enough. That she was broken. Disposable. That he needed someone who could actually stand beside him. Now he was being celebrated while Vivian, the woman who'd helped build his empire, was supposed to what? Applaud. Forget. She picked up her phone. I'd like to confirm my attendance. Table for one, please. The organizer's voice brightened. Ms. Carter, we're honored. Would you like to be seated with the other fund managers? Front row, Vivian said. I want a clear view of the stage. The night of the event, Vivian spent 3 hours getting ready. Not out of vanity. Strategy. She chose a custom Dior gown. Midnight blue with silver threading that caught the light with every movement. Cut perfectly to work with her wheelchair but look like it belonged on a red carpet. Her jewelry was deliberate. Diamond earrings. Not borrowed, not from Mitchell. Purchased with money she'd earned managing a $340 million fund. Hair and makeup flawless. Professional. Powerful. Maria came by the apartment to see her before she left. Her mother stood in the doorway and just stared. What? Vivian asked. You look like a woman about to win a war. I already won, Mom. Tonight I'm just collecting the acknowledgement. Be careful, baby. Men like Mitchell don't like being shown up. Vivian smiled. Then he should have thought about that before he left me with nothing. She arrived at the Plaza Hotel at 6:45 p.m. 15 minutes before doors opened. The same ballroom where she and Mitchell had celebrated Blackwood Capital's 10th anniversary 3 years ago. The last night before everything shattered. Vivian rolled through those doors and felt the weight of memory. But not pain. Not anymore. This was justice. 600 people filled the Plaza Ballroom by 7 p.m. Every major investor, hedge fund manager, and financial executive in Manhattan. Vivian positioned herself at her front row table. Alone. Unbothered. Radiating the kind of confidence that made people turn and stare. They approached immediately. Ms. Carter. The Carter Fund's Q3 returns are extraordinary. 31%. Vivian, Forbes wants a follow-up interview. Your accessible tech thesis is revolutionizing the sector. Ms. Carter, might we schedule a meeting? We're looking to diversify into disability markets. She smiled. Gracious. Professional. Gave each person exactly 30 seconds before moving on. All the while, she tracked Mitchell across the room. He stood with Vitalis near the bar. She wore red. Too bright. Too attention-seeking. Mitchell looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. They'd been married 2.5 years now. The fairy tale had clearly soured. Vivian watched Vitalis touch Mitchell's arm while talking to another couple. Watched him pull away slightly. Watched the tension in his shoulders. Trouble in paradise. Then Mitchell saw her. He froze mid-conversation. His face went pale. He said something to Vitalis, who turned to look. Vitalis's expression was priceless. Shock. Fear. Recognition that Vivian wasn't the broken woman they'd abandoned. Vivian lifted her champagne glass slightly. A small toast across the crowded room. Then she turned away. Dismissed them with the ease of someone who no longer cared. Dinner was served at 7:30. Vivian barely touched her food. She wasn't here to eat. The awards ceremony began at 8:15 p.m. 5 recipients. Mitchell was saved for last. The grande finale. The biggest name. Vivian sat through the first 4 awards with perfect composure. Applauded when appropriate. Smiled at the right moments. Looked like someone who belonged in this room because she'd earned her seat. Then came Mitchell's introduction. Our final honoree tonight needs no introduction. Mitchell Blackwood has built Blackwood Capital from a small boutique firm into a billion-dollar powerhouse. His vision, determination, and leadership have made him one of Manhattan's most respected investors. The speech went on. 5 minutes of praise. Accomplishments. Growth metrics. Nothing about the clients he'd lost. Nothing about the struggling performance. Nothing about the wife he'd abandoned. Mitchell walked to the stage. The applause was loud. Genuine. He looked older under the stage lights. More tired. The lines around his eyes had deepened. His smile was practiced but hollow. "Thank you," he began. "Building Blackwood Capital has been the greatest achievement of my life. But I didn't do it alone." He talked about his team, his vision, his dedication, his sacrifices. Not once did he mention Vivian, the woman who'd cultivated half his client relationships, who'd made his firm feel human, who'd stood beside him at every event, every dinner, every pitch. Erased. Like she'd never existed. Vivian sat perfectly still, face neutral. But inside, something cold and focused crystallized. After the ceremony, the ballroom dissolved into networking. People clustered around the honorees. Congratulations flowing like the champagne. Vivian rolled toward the exit. She'd seen enough. Vivian. Mitchell's voice. Behind her. She stopped. Didn't turn immediately. Just sat there letting him come to her. When she finally turned, he was standing 3 feet away. Vitalis was nowhere to be seen. "Mitchell. That was you, wasn't it? The Hartman Trust. The Pemberton account. You've been poaching my clients." Vivian smiled. "Poaching suggests I took something that belonged to you. I simply offered them better returns. 31% versus your, what was it? 7% this quarter." His jaw tightened. "What are you doing, Vivian?" "Building a career. Same thing you did. Why? Is there a problem?" "You're doing this to hurt me." "Hurt you?" She laughed. Soft. Genuine. "Mitchell, I don't think about you enough to want to hurt you. I'm just very good at my job. Better than I ever was while I was busy making you look competent." His face flushed. "I made you who you were. No. You made me your accessory. I made myself who I am now. There's a difference. This is about the divorce. You're bitter." Vivian looked at him. Really looked at him. This man who'd once seemed so powerful, so untouchable. He looked small now. Defensive. Grasping. "I'm not bitter," she said quietly. "I'm grateful. You leaving me was the best thing that ever happened. It forced me to become someone who didn't need you. Or anyone." "Vivian. You stood in my rehabilitation room and told me I wasn't enough. That you needed someone whole. Someone who could stand beside you." She paused. Let the words settle. "But here's what you didn't understand, Mitchell. I was never beside you. I was holding you up. And the moment I let go, you started falling." Mitchell's hands clenched. "I built Blackwood Capital. Me. Not you. You built the foundation. I'll give you that. But I built the relationships. The trust. The humanity that made people want to invest with you instead of the 100 other firms exactly like yours." She gestured around the ballroom. "Look around. How many of these people have approached you tonight? Really talked to you, not just congratulated you. Mitchell glanced around. His expression flickered. Now watch this, Vivian said. She rolled toward a group of investors near the bar. Within seconds, they surrounded her. Smiling. Engaged. Treating her like someone who mattered. She spoke with them for 2 minutes. Then returned to Mitchell. See the difference? They don't want to be around you, Mitchell. They're here because the event requires it. But they want to be around me because I offer them something real. You've turned into someone cruel, Mitchell said quietly. No. I've turned into someone honest. There's a difference. Vitalis appeared then, threading through the crowd. She looked nervous. Uncomfortable. Mitchell, we should go, she said, not looking at Vivian. Vivian smiled at her. Hello, Vitalis. Congratulations on the marriage. I hear it's going well. Vitalis's face went tight. We're very happy. Really? That's not what I heard. Something about separate bedrooms? Therapy sessions. How do you? Manhattan's a small town when you know the right people. Smaller still when those people remember who threw parties that made them feel valued. Mitchell stepped between them. That's enough. Is it? Vivian's voice was ice. Because I don't think I'm done. You see, I spent 3 years being quiet, being dignified, building my empire while you collected your awards and pretended you did it alone. She rolled closer. Mitchell stepped back instinctively. But tonight, watching you accept an award for excellence, while your firm hemorrhages clients and your marriage falls apart, tonight I realized something. I don't need revenge. Your life is revenge enough. Vivian. You traded a partner for a trophy. You threw away someone who made you better for someone who makes you look better. And now you're discovering that looking good isn't the same as being good. She glanced at Vitalis. And you. You waited in my shadow for years. Finally got everything you wanted. How does it feel? Is Mitchell everything you imagined when you were sleeping with him while I was learning to use a wheelchair? Vitalis's eyes filled with tears. She turned and walked away. Mitchell watched her go, torn between following and staying. Go ahead, Vivian said. Chase after her. It's what you're good at. Running from difficult things. I'm sorry, Mitchell said quietly, for how I handled things. For abandoning you. For not being strong enough. I don't want your apology. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that you didn't break me. You freed me. She started to roll away, then stopped. Oh, and Mitchell. The Caldwell Foundation is moving their $180 million to my fund next month. Just thought you should know before you read about it in the journal. His face went white. The Caldwell Foundation was Blackwood Capital's largest client. They can't. I have a contract. Contracts expire. Yours did last week. I checked. Vivian rolled away, leaving Mitchell standing alone in the middle of the Plaza Ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people who no longer saw him as the man of the hour. They were all watching her. Vivian made it to the lobby before her hands started shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From 3 years of patience finally paying off. Maria was waiting by the entrance. She took one look at Vivian's face and smiled. How did it go? I won, Mom. I never doubted it for a second. They left together. Mother and daughter. The janitor from Flatbush and the billionaire investor who'd come from nothing and built everything. Behind them, the Plaza Hotel glittered. Inside, Mitchell Blackwood was probably realizing that losing Vivian had cost him more than a marriage. It had cost him his empire. But Vivian wasn't thinking about Mitchell anymore. She was thinking about her fund. Her companies. Her next investment. The future she'd built from the ruins of the life someone else had destroyed. 3 days later, the Wall Street Journal ran a story. Carter Fund secures $180 million Caldwell Foundation investment. The article detailed Vivian's track record. Her vision. Her understanding of underserved markets that traditional investors missed. It mentioned Mitchell Blackwood only once. A single line in the 10th paragraph. Blackwood Capital, which previously managed the Caldwell account, declined to comment. Vivian read that article in her office. A corner suite in a midtown building with views of Central Park. The same park she'd once seen from Mitchell's penthouse. She wasn't angry. Wasn't bitter. Wasn't even satisfied. She was free. Free from the girl who'd pressed her face against a bus window and promised herself a life she hadn't earned yet. Free from the woman who'd built herself into someone else's perfect accessory. Free from the victim who'd sat in a rehabilitation center wondering if life was over. She was Vivian Carter. Self-made. Unbothered. Unstoppable. And if Mitchell Blackwood's world was crumbling? That wasn't her revenge. That was his consequence. There's a difference. The confrontation is over. Mitchell saw what he'd thrown away. Vivian proved what she'd become. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Vivian to do something different? There's no wrong answer here. Some people believe in quiet success, others want louder justice. What's your take? Let me know in the comments. Because what comes next is the epilogue, where we see what happened to everyone 5 years later. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how this story truly ends. October 2019. The Caldwell Foundation announcement hit Mitchell Blackwood like a financial earthquake. $180 million. Gone. Moved to Vivian Carter's fund with a press release that praised her innovative approach and exceptional understanding of emerging markets. The Wall Street Journal ran it as front-page business news. Bloomberg called it the most significant client defection in Blackwood Capital's history. Mitchell's firm didn't just lose money. It lost credibility. Within 2 weeks, 3 more clients announced they were exploring other options. Industry code for "we're leaving but trying to be polite about it." By November, Blackwood Capital had hemorrhaged $420 million in assets under management, nearly half their client base. Mitchell's management fees dropped from $8.4 million annually to $4.6 million. His profit share collapsed. The firm that had once been worth $60 million was now valued at maybe $20 million. And everyone knew why. Not because of market conditions. Not because of poor performance, though that didn't help. Because the woman who'd made his firm feel human had left. And taken her magic with her. December brought the divorce filing. Vitaly's filed first, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mitchell had abandoned his paralyzed wife for Vitaly's. Now Vitaly's was abandoning Mitchell for being emotionally unavailable. What goes around, as they say. The divorce was ugly. Public. Vitaly's wanted half of everything, including his stake in Blackwood Capital. Mitchell fought hard. But the prenup he'd insisted on, the one designed to protect his assets from gold diggers, had a fidelity clause. Turns out sleeping with your wife's best friend while your first wife was in a rehabilitation center counted as infidelity. Who knew? The settlement cost Mitchell $12 million. The legal fees cost another $2 million. By February 2020, Mitchell Blackwood was worth maybe $25 million. Still wealthy by any normal standard. But not by Manhattan billionaire standards. Not by the standards of the man who'd once been Forbes' rising star of finance. He'd become ordinary. Diminished. Forgotten. The invitations stopped coming. The profiles stopped running. The speaking engagements dried up. He was still managing money. Still running Blackwood Capital. But the firm felt like a shadow of what it had been. And everyone knew it was his fault. While Mitchell fell, Vivian soared. January 2020. The Carter Fund hit $500 million in assets under management. March brought the Forbes cover. Vivian Carter, the investor who saw what others missed. The article detailed her journey. The accident. The abandonment. The comeback. Her 34% annual returns that made traditional fund managers look incompetent. But more than that, it talked about her vision. Her understanding that the disability market wasn't niche. It was massive. Global. Worth trillions. And she'd been right about all of it. Carter Luxe expanded into 15 countries. Revenue hit $47 million annually. The brand became synonymous with luxury accessible living. Vivian's personal net worth crossed $60 million. Then $80 million. Then $100 million. Self-made. Every single dollar. She bought a penthouse. Not on Central Park West. That would have been petty. She went bigger. A duplex penthouse in the Woolworth building. $24 million. Fully accessible. Views that made Mitchell's old place look like a studio apartment. Maria moved into the guest suite. Not out of necessity. Out of choice. "I'm not letting you rattle around this palace alone," her mother said. "Someone's got to keep you humble." Vivian laughed. "Mom, I manage $500 million. I'm past humble." "Then I've still got work to do." April 2020 brought the invitation Vivian had never expected. Columbia Business School wanted her to deliver the commencement address. "You represent everything we teach," the dean said. Resilience. Innovation. The ability to see opportunities where others see obstacles. Vivian stood on that stage, actually stood with leg braces and a cane, because she'd been working with a new specialist, and looked out at 600 graduating students. 15 years ago, I sat where you're sitting," she began. Broke. Ambitious. Absolutely certain I knew what success looked like. She paused. Let them lean in. I was wrong. Success isn't what I thought it was. It's not the penthouse or the wealthy husband or the invitations to the right parties. Those things are just decoration. Real success is building something that can't be taken away. Skills. Knowledge. Relationships built on genuine value. A reputation earned through excellence, not association. Some of you will face setbacks. Maybe not as dramatic as mine. Maybe more so. You'll lose jobs. Relationships. Opportunities you thought were guaranteed. And in those moments you'll have a choice. You can let the setback define you. Or you can let it refine you. She looked directly at the camera recording the speech. Knew Mitchell would probably watch it eventually. The people who abandon you when you're struggling? They're not the villain of your story. They're the catalyst. They're forcing you to become who you were always meant to be. So thank them. Silently. Privately. And then show them what they lost. The applause lasted 45 seconds. That speech went viral. 2 million views in the first week. 10 million by month's end. Vivian Carter became a symbol. Not just of comeback. Of transformation. June 2020. 4 years after the accident. Vivian could walk now. Not perfectly. Not without pain. She still used the wheelchair for long distances and kept the cane nearby. But she could walk into a room. Stand at a podium. Move through the world on her own 2 feet. The doctors called it miraculous. Vivian called it stubborn. "You never gave up," Dr. Chen said during a follow-up appointment. "In 4 years, I've never seen you miss a therapy session. Never seen you accept limitations." "I had motivation," Vivian said simply. July brought the call she'd been half expecting. "Ms. Carter, this is Robert Blackwood, Mitchell's father." Vivian remembered Robert. Old money. Cold personality. The kind of man who measured worth in dollar signs. "Mr. Blackwood, what can I do for you?" "I'm taking control of Blackwood Capital. Mitchell is stepping down as CEO. Effective immediately." Silence. Vivian let it stretch. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. My son made catastrophic decisions. Personal and professional. He's paying the price." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that what you did, building your own empire, proving your worth, that's what Mitchell should have seen in you. But he was too weak. Too shallow." Another pause. "You were always the smart one, Vivian. I told him that. He didn't listen." Robert Blackwood hung up. Vivian sat in her office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just peace. Mitchell's father calling to apologize on his son's behalf wasn't victory. It was confirmation that she'd never needed Mitchell's family to validate her. She'd validated herself. September 2024. 5 years after the confrontation. Vivian's fund manages $1.2 billion in assets. Carter Lux generates $180 million in annual revenue. Her personal net worth sits at $340 million. She's been featured on 60 Minutes. Given a TED Talk that's been viewed 28 million times. Written a book, Built from Breaking, that spent 14 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. She sits on the boards of 4 major companies. Advises the UN on disability inclusion in developing economies. Mentors 50 young investors annually through a program she founded. Maria is 70 now. Healthy. Happy. Living in the Woolworth penthouse and telling everyone who'll listen about her daughter who conquered Manhattan. Vivian is 39 years old. Single by choice. Focused on building rather than finding. Do you ever think about dating again? A journalist asked her recently. I'm too busy building empires, Vivian replied. Maybe when I hit $1 billion. Mitchell Blackwood. He's still in Manhattan. Still managing money. Blackwood Capital survives with $380 million in assets. A fraction of what it once was. He lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Murray Hill. Respectable. Comfortable. But not remotely close to the penthouse he once owned. He's 44 now. Single. His second marriage lasted less than 3 years. He still sees Vivian occasionally. At conferences. Industry events. She's always gracious. Professional. Treats him like any other colleague. Which is somehow worse than if she treated him like an enemy. Because enemies still matter. Colleagues are just there. Vitalis Montgomery married a banker in 2022. Lives in Connecticut. Posts rarely on social media. The fairy tale princess who thought stealing someone's husband would make her happy learned that stolen things never quite fit right. And Vivian. She walks into rooms and everyone turns. Not because she's in a wheelchair, though she still uses one for long events. But because she's Vivian Carter. The woman who refused to stay broken. The investor who saw what everyone missed. The voice for a community that Wall Street had ignored for decades. She built an empire from nothing. Twice. Once from poverty. Once from paralysis. And both times, she did it on her own terms. That's not revenge. That's not karma. That's just what happens when you underestimate someone who's hungrier than you'll ever be. There's a photo in Vivian's office. Black and white. Framed simply. It shows a 13-year-old girl pressing her face against a bus window. Staring at the Upper East Side like it was another planet. That girl promised herself something that day. She'd live in that world. No matter what it cost. She kept that promise. But the woman who kept it isn't the same girl who made it. That girl thought success meant belonging. Fitting in. Being chosen. This woman knows success means building something so undeniable that people have no choice but to notice. Mitchell didn't break Vivian. He revealed her. The accident didn't destroy her. It refined her. And every person who counted her out, they gave her fuel. Vivian Carter is worth $340 million today. But that's not the number that matters. The number that matters is 0. That's how many times she compromised who she was to please someone else. How many times she apologized for being broken. How many times she let anyone make her feel less than extraordinary. 0. And that, more than any bank balance, is what victory looks like. Looking at where everyone ended up, do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of choices? I want to hear what you think. Because this story isn't really about revenge or justice. It's about what happens when you refuse to let the worst moment of your life become your defining moment. Vivian Carter didn't get even. She got better. And sometimes, that's the most powerful response of all. It's not about wheelchairs or billionaires or spectacular revenge. It's about something deeper. Something that matters whether you're managing $1 billion fund or trying to make rent. Your worth isn't determined by who stays. It's revealed by how you rebuild when they leave. Mitchell thought he was discarding damaged goods. He was actually removing dead weight. Vitalis thought she was winning a prize. She was inheriting someone else's problems. And Vivian. She thought her life was over. It was just beginning. The real lesson isn't that bad people get punished. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they live comfortable lives and never face consequences. The lesson is that your response to betrayal matters more than the betrayal itself. Vivian could have been bitter. Could have spent years in therapy dissecting why Mitchell left. Could have turned her pain into a weapon designed specifically to hurt him. She did something smarter. She turned her pain into fuel. Not for revenge. For excellence. And excellence doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need validation. It just needs work. In her TED Talk, Vivian said something that went viral. People ask me if I've forgiven Mitchell. That's the wrong question. Forgiveness implies he still has power over my emotional state. He doesn't. I've moved past him entirely. The question isn't whether I forgive him. It's whether I'm grateful for the lesson. And I am. She went on to explain her philosophy on success. Success isn't about being chosen. It's about being undeniable. When you're chosen, someone else holds the power. They can unchoose you. But when you're undeniable, when you've built something so excellent that people have no choice but to notice, that's yours. Forever. Mitchell abandoned me because I was in a wheelchair. But I was never the wheelchair. I was never the accident. I was always the brain, the drive, the hunger that got me out of Flatbush in the first place. He took away the circumstances, the marriage, the money, the life. But he couldn't take away the core of who I was. And that core, that's what rebuilt everything. She paused. Let the audience absorb it. So if you're watching this and you're going through your own version of my story, if someone just told you you're not enough, or circumstances just destroyed what you thought was your future, remember this. They didn't take anything that matters. They just revealed what you're actually made of. Now prove it. To yourself. Not to them. The standing ovation lasted 2 minutes. Here's what I want you to understand about Vivian's story. She's not special because she recovered from paralysis. Statistically rare, sure. But that's not the lesson. She's not special because she became wealthy. Plenty of people build wealth through luck or inheritance or timing. Vivian is special because she refused to let anyone else define her value. Not the doctors who said she'd never walk. Not Mitchell who said she wasn't enough. Not the society pages that wrote her off as a tragic footnote to someone else's success story. She defined herself. Through work. Through excellence. Through becoming so undeniably good at what she did that the world had no choice but to pay attention. That's replicable. You don't need to be a finance genius. You don't need to manage billions. You just need to refuse to accept someone else's assessment of your worth. Your ex says you're not attractive enough? Build a life so fulfilling that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Your family says you'll never succeed? Succeed so thoroughly that their doubt becomes embarrassing in retrospect. The world says people like you don't belong in certain spaces? Enter those spaces and belong so completely that they rewrite the rules. That's what Vivian did. Not through revenge. Through excellence. You know what's interesting about Vivian's story? Mitchell isn't the villain anymore. At least not to her. In a 2023 interview, a journalist asked Vivian, "Do you ever see Mitchell Blackwood? Do you feel vindicated when you do?" Vivian's answer was perfect. "I see him occasionally at industry events. We're cordial, professional, and I feel nothing. Not vindicated. Not angry. Not even satisfied. He's just a person who made choices that worked out badly for him. That's not my victory. That's just his consequence. My victory is that I built a life I'm proud of. A business that matters. A community I serve. A legacy that will outlive me. Mitchell's downfall isn't part of that legacy. It's just background noise." The journalist pressed, But don't you think about what he took from you? Vivian smiled. He didn't take anything. He removed himself from my life. There's a difference. Everything I have now, the fund, Carterlux, the relationships, the reputation, I built that without him. Which means he never had any claim to it in the first place. The woman he abandoned? She needed him. She'd built her identity around being his wife. The woman I am now. She doesn't need anyone. She chooses people, partners, collaborators. But she doesn't need them. That transformation, that's my victory, not his failure. If you're still watching, you're probably here for a reason. Maybe you're going through your own version of Vivian's story. Different details. Same core wound. Someone told you you're not enough. Circumstances destroyed what you thought was your path. The life you built fell apart and you're sitting in the wreckage wondering what comes next. Here's what comes next. You rebuild. Differently. Better. Not to prove anything to them. To prove something to yourself. That you're not defined by who stays. You're defined by how you respond when they leave. That your worth isn't determined by circumstances. It's revealed through your response to circumstances. That the worst moment of your life doesn't have to be your defining moment. Unless you let it. Vivian Carter was abandoned in a rehabilitation center with $2 million and a broken spine. Today she's worth $340 million and walks into rooms like she owns them. Because she does. Not financially. Energetically. She owns her story. Her transformation. Her victory. Mitchell is just a footnote. The catalyst who accidentally gave her permission to become who she was always meant to be. You're Mitchell. Whoever they are, whatever they took, isn't your villain. They're your catalyst. They just removed themselves from a story they weren't worthy of being part of. Now write the rest of that story. Make it so good that their absence becomes obvious. Not as punishment. As plot development. Vivian Carter turns 40 next year. She's planning a celebration. Not a party. A foundation launch. The Carter Foundation for Accessible Innovation. $100 million endowment. Focused on funding entrepreneurs with disabilities who traditional investors overlook. I want to be for other people what Rebecca Stein was for me, Vivian said in the press release. The person who sees potential when everyone else sees obstacles. Maria will be there. 70 years old. Proud. Still telling everyone who'll listen about her daughter who refused to stay broken. Mitchell won't be invited. Not out of spite. Out of irrelevance. He's not part of this story anymore. He hasn't been for years. This story belongs to Vivian. To Maria. To every person who's ever been counted out and decided to prove the counters wrong. It belongs to you if you want it. Because here's the truth they don't tell you. The people who abandon you aren't the end of your story. They're not even the climax. They're the inciting incident. The thing that forces your transformation. What you do next. That's the story. Vivian Carter chose excellence. Chose building. Chose becoming so undeniable that the world had no choice but to make room for her. You can choose that too. Different industry. Different circumstances. Same core principle. Your worth isn't determined by who stays. It's proven by what you build when they leave. And if you build something extraordinary, their absence stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like freedom. That's not revenge. That's not karma. That's just what happens when you refuse to let someone else write your ending. Vivian Carter didn't get even. She got better. And then she got building. And somewhere in Manhattan, Mitchell Blackwood lives with the knowledge that he had something extraordinary and threw it away because it got difficult. That's not Vivian's revenge. That's his reality. And the difference between those two things. That's everything. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own journey, or if it gave you permission to rebuild, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about people who refused to stay broken. Because the world is full of Vivian Carters. People who turned their worst moment into their origin story. and every single one of them deserves to be celebrated. I'll see you in the next one.